My name is Frances and I am 29 years old. At 28, I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. I still remember the exact moment the doctor said the words, like they were spoken underwater, but somehow still loud enough to split my life in two. 1 second I was a normal working woman with small dreams and long plans, and the next second I was a patient with a ticking clock. My hands were shaking when I walked out of the hospital, my phone heavy in my palm, because there was only one thing I wanted to do: call my parents. I called my parents crying. I didn't even say hello properly. I just broke down, words tumbling over each other, telling them what the doctor said. How serious it was, how scared I was. There was a silence on the other end that felt wrong, too long, too empty. Then my dad sighed and said the words that still echo in my head. "We can't deal with this right now. Your sister is planning her wedding." I thought I misheard him. I waited for him to correct himself, to say sorry, to ask how bad it was, to tell me to come home. Instead, my mom added, softly, that this was a stressful time for the family, and that I should be strong. That call ended quickly. When it did, I was still holding the phone, staring at the wall, realizing something terrifying, not just that I had cancer, but that I was about to go through it alone. The days that followed blurred into appointments, scans, and paperwork. Chemo was scheduled fast, like the universe didn't care that I hadn't even processed the diagnosis yet. I kept thinking my parents would call back, that maybe they were just in shock. They didn't. I texted updates. Short replies came back hours later. Always practical, never emotional. My sister didn't call at all. I later found out she was busy picking flower arrangements and tasting cake. I don't blame her anymore, but at the time, it felt like I had been quietly erased. When chemo started, I sat in that cold chair surrounded by strangers, listening to machines beep in calm, uncaring rhythms. I watched other patients get blankets tucked around them by family members, saw hands being held, saw tears wiped away. I went through chemo alone. No one sat beside me. No one drove me home. I learned to pack my own snacks, to bring my own courage, to cry quietly so no one would notice. Chemo stripped me down to my bones, physically and emotionally. My hair fell out in clumps, and every time I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. I was nauseous, exhausted, and terrified. But the worst pain wasn't in my body, it was the absence of my parents. I stopped calling after a while, because every conversation left me feeling smaller, like an inconvenience. When I mentioned side effects, my mom would say things like, "At least you're young," or "It could be worse." When I cried, my dad reminded me again that my sister's wedding was coming up and they were overwhelmed. I learned to stop sharing. Silence became easier than disappointment. I attended my sister's wedding wearing a wig that didn't quite feel like mine and a smile that hurt my face more than chemo ever did. People congratulated my parents on raising such a beautiful bride. No one asked about me. My parents didn't introduce me as their sick daughter. I was just Frances, the other one. I stood in the corner during the reception, sipping water, feeling dizzy, wondering how it was possible to feel so invisible in a room full of people who shared my blood. When the music played and everyone danced, I slipped outside and sat alone under the stars, hugging my knees, promising myself one thing: if I survived this, I would never forget who showed up and who didn't. The treatments dragged on for months. There were nights I slept on the bathroom floor because it was closer to the toilet. There were mornings I couldn't lift my head without feeling like the world was spinning. Still, I went to every appointment. I signed every form. I fought, even when I was tired of being strong. 2 years later, after more fear than I knew a human could hold, the doctor finally said the words I had barely dared to imagine: I was cancer-free. I cried harder than I had the day I was diagnosed. I wanted to call my parents, but something stopped me. Instead, I sat in my car, hands on the steering wheel, breathing, realizing I had survived the hardest chapter of my life without them. Last week, my dad called crying. His voice was shaking, broken in a way I had never heard before. He said he needed a caregiver. He said he was scared. As he spoke, every memory came rushing back. The hospital chair, the empty waiting rooms, the wedding music playing while I sat outside alone. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I listened calmly because I already knew what my answer would be. My answer took exactly 4 words. When my dad finished speaking, there was a long silence on the line, the kind that demands something from you. He was crying, actually crying, telling me how weak he felt, how doctors said he couldn't manage alone anymore, how my mother was exhausted, how they needed help. He said my name the way he used to when I was a child and had fallen down, like calling me would magically fix everything. Last week, Dad called crying, he needs a caregiver. As I listened, I realized something shocking about myself. I didn't feel anger the way I expected to. I felt clear, calm, like a door inside me had already closed a long time ago. My answer took exactly 4 words. I said them slowly, clearly, without raising my voice. I can't deal now. The line went completely silent. No breathing. No sobbing. Just emptiness. For the first time in my life, my dad had no words. After I hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, waiting for guilt to crash into me. Everyone talks about how forgiveness is necessary, how family is everything, how you should always show up for your parents no matter what. But here's the truth, no one likes to say out loud. Sometimes the people who abandon you during your worst moments don't get to demand you during theirs. I didn't scream at him. I didn't insult him. I didn't throw my cancer in his face. I simply reflected his own words back to him, years later when the roles were reversed. And somehow that felt more powerful than any long speech ever could. My mom called later that night, her tone sharp, accusing me of being heartless, of forgetting everything they had done for me growing up. I listened quietly, letting her words roll over me like waves that no longer had the strength to pull me under. I reminded her calmly that when I was 28, bald, terrified, and being pumped full of poison to stay alive, they told me they couldn't deal with it because my sister was planning her wedding. I reminded her that I went through chemo alone, that 2 years later, I'm cancer-free not because they supported me, but because I refused to give up. She cried. She said they didn't think it was that bad. That sentence hurt more than anything else. Cancer doesn't get less real just because it's inconvenient. Some people asked me if I regret my answer, if I lie awake at night wondering if I should have said yes. The truth is, I sleep better now than I did for years. Survival changes you. It burns away the need to please people who don't protect you. I didn't stop loving my parents during cancer. I stopped trusting them. And trust, once broken at that level, doesn't magically grow back because someone is scared. I learned that compassion doesn't mean self-sacrifice. And boundaries don't make you cruel, they make you sane. My sister reached out after hearing what happened. She said I was being dramatic, that I was punishing Dad for something in the past. I told her this wasn't punishment. This was consequence. When you teach someone they're alone in a crisis, don't be shocked when they believe you later. I reminded her that during my treatments, no one rearranged schedules for me. No one dropped everything. No one moved mountains. I survived anyway. That doesn't mean I owe my strength to anyone who watched from a distance. People love stories where the sick daughter forgives everyone and rushes back home to care for aging parents. This isn't that story. This is a story about a young woman who learned her worth the hard way. About a woman who realized that love without action is just noise. At 28, I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. I called my parents crying. Dad said, "We can't deal with this right now. Your sister is planning her wedding." I went through chemo alone. 2 years later, I'm cancer-free. Last week, Dad called crying, he needs a caregiver. My answer took exactly 4 words. Those words weren't revenge. They were truth. I still hope my parents find support. I hope they find peace. I just know it doesn't have to come at the cost of reopening wounds that nearly destroyed me. Walking away doesn't always mean hatred. Sometimes it means survival. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to rewrite history just to make someone else more comfortable. If this story made you feel something, anger, strength, clarity, or even permission to set your own boundaries, then you're not alone. Stories like this exist because real people live them. If you want to hear more real, raw stories about betrayal, survival, and quiet revenge, make sure you subscribe to the channel and stay with us for the next one.